Well, Megyn Kelly's takedown of Donald Trump during his 2015 campaign led to the creation of the film Bombshell, starring Charlize Theron, Nicole Kidman and Margot Robbie.
The former Fox News presenter, who's now launching her own podcast, had several run-ins with the president. And Megyn Kelly joins us now live from New York to talk about her new podcast. But Megyn, it's absolutely lovely to see you. But I wonder if we can just reflect on that moment, the moment in the debate when he defends the way he talks about women, and then subsequently talks about you, a woman, in a denigrating manner.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sort of got right to the point that I was trying to raise, right? Which is, you speak about women in a way that has a particular edge to it. You have a history of it, and you're going to get hit over the head by the Democrats with this, should you become the nominee. Because this is back during the Republican primaries, and people were trying to decide whether they should choose him as the Republican nominee. But after that moment, it was just so surreal, because I remember I saw it come up on my phone, and then just my phone blew up. And truly, from that moment forward, my life in many ways has never been the same. It's just everything exploded. It was a nonstop barrage of insults and attacks by Trump. And that's fine. I can take my licks just like we all can as reporters. But it just got to such an insane level with security and threats and so on that, you know, my relationships at Fox changed. My relationship with Donald was certainly different. And I don't know, in some ways it just gave me a better perspective on what I care about and what matters to me.
Megyn, it's Piers here. I'm absolutely thrilled you're doing the podcast because I really miss you on the airways. I used to love watching you of Fox. It was a nightly show you did there. It was so good because you were one of the fairer, I thought, hosts on all cable news in America. You always tried to be fair-minded about stuff. And what's interesting about your podcast is you explore this a lot, the tribalism that has erupted really through social media in many ways has made political discourse so toxic that it's almost like no one cares anymore about facts. All they care about is what their tribe has decided the line should be, and then that's it, about everything.
Yeah, that's right. Well, honestly, this is one of the things I admire about you, Piers, is that I used to say to my husband, Doug, I want to be like Piers Morgan when I grow up. Sorry, Susanna, I know we should
Very
be
few people say that, I have to say.
Yeah, but
I know, I'm adding
lots
to the
of people
problem.
want to be like Piers Morgan, but you have to have a particularly thick skin to be Piers Morgan.
I have that, but I just love how you say what you feel. And you cut through the BS and you just give it to people straight, even if your opinion is controversial. And I'm pretty moderate in my political views. I'm in the center. I got a little center right in me, and I got very little center left in me. But I'm just not an extremist when it comes to political positions. And I want to be able to say when Trump does something outrageous that it was outrageous, and not get any blowback from my employer. And I also want to call out some of the woke BS that we're having right now, not just in our country but yours as well, about how you can't say anything about anything or think anything about anybody or anything. Otherwise, you're a bigot and you're a racist and you're transphobe and it's like, oh my God.
You know, I've got a book coming out literally next week.
Oh, have you?
It's called Wake Up. You can order it on Amazon if you're watching. But it's called Wake Up. But it actually, the whole premise of the book is exactly that. It's how I actually speak more as a liberal than anything else to my fellow liberals, saying you're all going nuts. And actually, it's very self-defeating because you can't be a liberal and suppress free speech. I mean, the two things are inconsistent. They don't sit
That's where
together,
it's going.
do they?
No, and people are sick of it. I mean, who wants to have these perfect people, these woke scolds trying to correct the way they speak about some of the diciest issues we're dealing with right now as a society? These are complicated issues. Human beings are complicated. We don't have it all figured out when it comes to these issues, these social issues we're dealing with. And the response to an attempt to talk about any of it can't be quiet because you're awful. And I'm going to call you awful. I'm going to try to get you canceled. And I'm going to try to publicly humiliate you. And it's happening now. It's one thing for it to happen to people like us who are out there professionally. But it's happening to, civilians, right? Like people who haven't chosen to put themselves in the public square.
But it happened to you. But it happened to you, Megyn, in a very high-profile way. And I felt really incensed in a way about the rank hypocrisy of the way that you were treated, because you'd said something on your NBC morning show And I can't remember the exact wording, but you basically said in the old days of Halloween, kids could they could paint their faces black if they wanted to, you know. And this has obviously become a very hot issue now. But you were talking historically about what used to be tolerated. And you got completely vilified, shamed. You did a full apology, and that still wasn't enough, and you ended up having to leave the show. Now, at the same time, we had Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, who's been exposed 3 times for actually doing blackface himself, which you never did. And because he's woke and because he's a liberal darling, he's still the Prime Minister of Canada. And I found that inconsistency. That's one of the things that grates me most about the woke brigade, is that they don't apply the same standards to their own. It's only if it's someone they don't agree with.
Yeah, well, I think, having come from Fox was one factor in no one giving me the benefit of the doubt, because they thought I was on the other side of the aisle politically. And they're right, I'm not a Democrat, but I'm not a Republican either. But I do believe in discussing these issues. And what I'd noticed on the blackface front was this woman who is a real housewife was getting a hard time because she dressed as Diana Ross and she tinted her skin. And what I was trying to say is that, 30 years ago when I was a kid, that didn't cause that much of a commotion. People didn't react the way they do today. That's really what I was trying to say. And how did we get from that point to this point? And as it turns out, it's like half of Hollywood has actually worn blackface. Yeah. I later found out NBC put out 5 different shows with people wearing blackface, including just a couple of years before.
Well, their own nightly news anchor, Lester Holt, who's a black man, had actually done whiteface. And he's still hosting the NBC Nightly News. Again, I would say if you're going to have a dispassionate argument about this kind of issue, which is tinged with a lot of incendiary debate on either side, you've got to be fair-minded about it. And there's no fairness.
Well, my only hope on that is, look, obviously I'm fine. My only hope on it, and my concern at the time, was that it was going to stifle other people's willingness to engage in discussions, especially about race. I get that it's dicey and it's hard and it's scary, because you really can get your hand slapped and it can be painful. But we have to try. I mean, if you knew the number of people who came to me after that happened and said, I didn't understand that either. I didn't get it. And even black people coming over to me being like, what was the big deal? I didn't get it. And so what's the solution to that? Keep talking, keep chatting about it. There shouldn't be any sacred cow that can't be discussed. That's not our principle, either yours or ours.
Isn't it extraordinary, though, if just taking it back to the original point and the words that President Trump, the man who was running at the time, Donald Trump, to be president, we talk about the reasons people are cancelled, and yet he could get away with everything that he said about women. Then those Access Hollywood tapes came out just before the election. And the admission in that you could do things to women, they just let you because you're a celebrity. And yet there's no cancellation of Donald Trump. It seems ironic.
Well, I've thought about it a lot, because I did wonder at the time, what are the American people trying to say with this election? Because I don't think they like politically correct, lectures from people. And I think they were actually attracted to his willingness to buck those conventions. But it's bigger than that. They hired Donald Trump to be a wrecking ball. And as long as he was wrecking stuff, traditional media, elite anchors at Fox who didn't understand people and the way they really talk, and now it's the government, then they were behind him because the government wasn't working for them. And they're right, it wasn't. So they just decided to throw caution to the wind and try something new. And this was the package that came in, right? It's like the P.T. Barnum side of Trump, but also the guy who will take enormous risks and not care what the New York Times writes about him.
The funniest thing is he has the thinnest skin I've ever met and also the thickest. In other words, he reacts to everything, and yet he's able to soak up all manner of... He's an extraordinary figure in that sense. Let's just pivot quickly, Megyn. You had Charlize Theron play you in a movie. I mean, putting aside the subject matter, which we'll come to, how cool is that? I mean, she looked... You and her could be twins.
It was bizarre because I didn't have anything to do with the movie, although they did clearly crib large portions of my book. But then one day it was over the summer, and my phone started blowing up. I'm looking down, and it was all my friends sending me the trailer of the movie. And I don't know if you remember the trailer, but it had that sort of creepy music on it, and it was her in the elevator going to see Roger, and she
Roger
looked
Ailes, who was the
just
former boss of Fox.
like me. Right, Roger Ailes, who wound up going down. And she looked just like me. And it was like looking at myself, reliving a painful time in my life. And all I could think when I watched the trailer and then ultimately the movie was, there's a reason why I repressed this. I don't really want to be reminded of this period exactly.
Did you watch the movie in the end? Did you put yourself through watching the whole thing?
I did watch it. I watched it. The very first time I saw it was with my closest friends, including my friend Janice Dean at Fox, who really went through it with me and also came forward against Roger. And I give her all the credit in the world because she was the meteorologist. She wasn't making a lot of money. She really thought that we were going to get fired. I thought so too, but I was more financially secure than she was. And she went in there and did the right thing. And she's never gotten enough credit for it. But anyway, we watched it together. We held hands the entire time, and we cried our eyes out.
Really, yeah.
Just to remind people, Roger Ailes was the former CEO of Fox News, who was accused by multiple women of sexual harassment.
And he got fired, and then he died. Talking about Me Too and the Time's Up movements, Megyn, obviously, massive event, erupted in 2017 with the Harvey Weinstein expose and then carried on raging around the world. How far do you think it's gone? How effective have those campaigns been? Has the pendulum swung too far? I mean, what's your sort of assessment as we look at it now?
Well, I look at the Me Too movement as having done a lot of good. It's hard to look back at the fall of Roger Ailes or Harvey Weinstein or Les Moonves, who was running CBS, and say, it's bad that they were dethroned. It's not bad. It's good that we removed those guys from power, as they were hurting a lot of people. But I also think where the Democrats took it when we were having the nomination process, the confirmation process of our Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, really darkened the whole movement, tainted it in a way I don't think it can recover from, because they stood there because he'd been accused of sexual assault by a woman who knew him 30 years earlier and had never said anything publicly. And held signs reading, believe all women, which is a lot of nonsense. Women lie. We happen to be human beings. We're just like men. We're capable of lying and making stuff up.
There are awful women, and there are fabulous women, and there are awful men, and there are fabulous men.
Of course. And how do we advance as a gender, as women, as people, by asking for different standards and the elimination of all due process for the men who are accused? It's baloney. That's certainly not what I fought for. What I want, I'm the mother of 2 sons and a daughter. I want them both to be heard equally. God forbid they find themselves in this situation. So I think that really hurt the movement. And I think,
but Megyn,
sadly,
sorry,
what's happening to
just to interrupt,
yeah,
just for a moment. You say the accuser of Brett Kavanaugh is an assault that had happened 30 years before and she'd not said anything. But in the same breath, you'd said that you sat in a cinema and cried your eyes out because of something which had happened to you that you had felt it had been very difficult to speak out about at the time. You know, women do sometimes spend a long time reflecting on what's happened until they can get the courage to speak out about something. It doesn't mean it didn't happen, of course. No question. And that wasn't an attempt to hurt or rip on Blasey Ford, his accuser, though there were real problems with her story. I mean, she came forward with Democratic operatives. She had no eyewitnesses to support her, which often happens with women. But it was very hard to deny the guy a seat on the U.S. Supreme Court based on evidence that, from a legal standpoint, was thin. And that was up to the senators to decide what to do, and they decided to confirm him. So I'm not saying it can't be believed because it was old, but it was part of her problem in trying to convince these senators not to confirm the guy.
Yeah, Megyn, we're going to running out of time a bit. Who's going to win the election? We're 27 days away.
Boy, I mean, if you were betting at the racetrack, you'd put your money on Biden based on these polls. In particular, in the swing states, that's really all that matters. He's doing better than Trump in, I think, every single one of them.
But he's only doing slightly better than Hillary was at exactly the same stage. He's about 1.5 percentage points ahead of where she was in those swing states. That's not a lot. Exactly right. And, we have, I think Hillary was up even more closer to the election than Biden is right now. So the point is, don't rule Donald Trump out. The loyalty towards Trump among his core supporters, and frankly, the support for Trump by sort of the
elite Republicans who won't tell a pollster that they're going to vote for the guy because they've been told they're awful if they will, is significant. And what people do in that polling booth is between them and their God.
I think that's particularly true with Trump. I think there's a lot of silent Trump voters, and I think it's going to be very unpredictable. And I don't think it's going to end on the election night. I think we could be in for a few days or weeks of chaos because of the mail situation. I happen to know that your podcast is produced by a brilliant man called Steve Krakauer, because he used to produce all the digital output for my CNN show. So it's called The Megyn Kelly Show. Great to have you back doing your thing, and I look forward to coming on it to promote my book.
I can't wait to see you, Piers. It's a pleasure to be on, guys. Thanks for having me.
Megyn, lovely to have you. All the best.
Good to see you.